About 120,000 drones pledged by the UK were announced at a meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group in Berlin. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is closing ranks with Ukraine. During a meeting with Ukrainian President, she confirmed full support for Kiev.
US President Donald Trump said the war in Iran is, quote, very close to over.
A new flotilla mission with more than 60 boats is going to try to break the Gaza blockade one more time as the first 40 boats set sail from Barcelona.
About 120,000 drones pledged by the UK, alongside additional funding for NATO Pearl program, were announced at a meeting of the Ukraine Defence Contact Group in Berlin on Wednesday.
Drones have defined this war. They will be decisive to its outcome. That's why I'm announcing today the UK's biggest package of drones into Ukraine this year. Over 120,000 new drones will be delivered from the UK into Ukraine. We'll also provide hundreds of thousands of artillery rounds and thousands of air defence missiles, which together will help Ukraine defend its territory and strike back against Russian aggression.
German Defence Minister reiterated Berlin's latest military commitments, announced on Tuesday during German-Ukrainian government consultations, where the two sides signed a €4 billion defence package, including hundreds of Patriot missiles and joint drone production, as well as an agreement to share digital battlefield data. Ukraine's defense minister added that drones are responsible for the bulk of Ukraine's counterattacks and are critical on both the battlefield and in strikes behind enemy lines.
Following her fallout with Donald Trump, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is closing ranks with Ukraine. During a bilateral meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky in Rome on Wednesday, Meloni confirmed, quote, full support for Kyiv and announced interest in a joint drone production initiative between Italy and Ukraine. Another success for Kyiv's defense industry following cooperation agreements signed in Berlin and Oslo.
L'Italia continuerà a promuovere in sede G7 e in sede di Unione Europea la pressione economica sulla Federazione Russa, che continua a non mostrare segnali concreti nel percorso negoziale, insiste negli attacchi contro i civili, persevera nel colpire le infrastrutture indispensabili per la popolazione.
During the summit in Rome, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky also met with the Italian head of state Sergio Mattarella, who reaffirmed Italy's backing for Kyiv's accession process to the European Union.
I had to divert, because if I didn't do that...
US President Donald Trump said the war in Iran is, quote, very close to over. Trump's statement comes as the ceasefire that is set to expire on the 22nd of April remains on shaky ground. The United States is pressing ahead with its blockade on Iranian ports, while Tehran issued fresh threats in response. Nonetheless, officials said they were making progress on talks, and mediators said on Wednesday they moved closer to extend the ceasefire between Washington and Tehran. Negotiators are focusing on three key points that derailed last weekend's talks, including Iran's nuclear program, the Strait of Hormuz, and compensation for wartime damages. Despite the fragile truce, oil prices fell on Wednesday and US stocks rose in hopes of an end to the war. Meanwhile, Israel continued its aerial and ground war on Iran-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon. The attacks come just after Israel and Lebanon held their first direct talks in decades in Washington. Lebanon is engaged in direct diplomatic talks with Israel for the first time in 30 years, with the aim of ending fighting between Israel and the Hezbollah. The talks are taking place in Washington and are mediated by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
The number one objective at this stage is the end of hostilities and the cessation of the violence. Lebanon has paid an extremely high price and continues to pay an extremely high price, both in terms of death, injured, as well as massive displacement.
More than 2,000 Lebanese have been killed and around 1.2 million people have been internally displaced since Israel launched an air offensive followed by a ground invasion in March. Asked how Lebanon would circumvent Hezbollah's demilitarization refusal while seeking to convince Israel to end hostilities, Bissat hinted that the paramilitary group would eventually be pressured to disarm by popular demand.
We're counting on the national consensus at this point that nobody wants violence internally.
The fragile ceasefire reached between Israel, the US and Iran last week was not extended to Lebanon.
3 days after his party's landslide election victory, Peter Mayer says he has called for an early transfer of power as soon as possible during talks with Hungary's president, Tamás Sullyok. Speaking at a press conference in front of the presidential palace, Mayer told reporters he wanted the inaugural meeting of the new National Assembly to be held on the 4th of May, the day that official election results are expected to be released.
Abban maradtunk, hogy az elnök úr ennél korábban a lehető legkorábbi időpontra fogja összehívni az alakulóülést. Ő is úgy gondolja, és szerintem mindenki úgy gondolja, hogy a magyar nemzet érdeke, hogy egy ilyen erős választói felhatalmazás után a lehető leggyorsabban megtörténjen a kormányváltás és egyben rendszerváltás is. Elmondtam neki, hogy ha nem távozik önként a hivatalából, akkor élni fogunk a választóktól kapott felhatalmazással és alaptörvény módosítással és a szükséges módosításokkal el fogjuk távolítani a hivatalából őt is és az összes többi bábot, akit az Orbán rendszer nevezett ki a helyére, legyen szó legfőbb ügyészről, vagy éppen az Alkotmánybíróság elnökéről. Elnök úr sejtelmes választ adott erre a felvetésemre, azt mondta, hogy ő is természetesen szeretné megőrizni a jogállamot, Magyarország külföldi kifele történő reputációját és hírnevét, megfontolja, azt mondta elnök úr, a felhozott érveimet a távozásával kapcsolatban.
Maria, over 2 years, attracted a cross-section of public support to his Tisza party, which swept the ruling Fidesz from power on Sunday.
Magyar Péter a Sándor-palotához egyenesen a közmédiából érkezett, ahol másfél év után először volt vendég, előbb a Kossuth Rádióban, majd pedig az M1-en. Mindkét stúdióban elmondta, hogy amint kormányra kerülnek, ideiglenesen leállítják a közmédia hírszolgáltatását. Kónya Rita, Euronews, Budapest.
The EU's age verification app for online platform is technically ready and will soon be rolled out, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Wednesday, as a growing number of countries push ahead with plans to curb social media access for younger users.
You download the app, you set it up with your passport or your ID card, you then prove your age when accessing online services. Second, it respects the highest privacy standards in the world. Users will prove their age without revealing any other personal information. Put simply, it's completely anonymous. Users cannot be tracked. Third, the app works on any device, phone, tablet, computer, you name it.
European officials have warned children are increasingly exposed to harmful content online, citing cyberbullying and addictive features designed to maximize engagement as examples. Officials said the aim is to develop a single EU-wide system, avoiding a patchwork of national approaches. However, they did not provide a timeline for when the system will be fully deployed across the bloc, nor did they announce whether platforms will be required to adopt it. The move is aimed at major platforms such as TikTok, Meta's Facebook and Instagram, and Snapchat, which have clashed with Brussels' Digital Services Act over child safety and addictive design.
A new flotilla mission with around 40 boats has set sail for Gaza from Barcelona on Wednesday in a fresh bid to break the Israeli blockade and deliver aid to the region. According to the organizers of the Global Summit Flotilla, 20 more boats from France and 4 more from Italy will join the convoy on April 24 with a week-long stopover in Sicily for a non-violence training. Summit, which means resilience in Arabic, aims to rally hundreds of pro-Palestinian activists from dozens of countries. The ships in the flotilla are mostly sailboats. In late 2025, an initial flotilla of about 50 boats, composed of political figures and activists such as Sweden's Greta Thunberg, was boarded by Israeli Navy in international waters, which was an illegal action according to Amnesty International. Israel, on the other hand, invokes Article 51 of the UN Charter, asserting that the blockade and naval intervention are necessary measures to prevent the smuggling of weapons and dual-use materials. The Gaza Strip, governed by Hamas, has been under an Israeli blockade since 2007. The sides accuse each other of violating a ceasefire that came into effect on October 10, 2025, after 2 years of war.
A student has opened fire at 2 classrooms at a school in southern Turkey on Wednesday, leaving 9 people dead and 13 wounded, a local official said. The shooter was killed. It comes just 1 day after an ex-student opened fire at his former high school, wounding 16 people before killing himself.
Evet, 8. sınıf öğrencisi. Okulumuzun öğrencisi. Babası eski bir emniyetçi. Onun silahlarını aldığını tahmin ediyoruz.
Parents who heard about the incident rushed to the school. Police have increased security measures around the building, and television footage showed ambulances present in the area. The local prosecutor's office launched an immediate investigation into the shooting. The motive of the attack is not known.